Well, good morning. Welcome to Go Around. This morning flying Msfs 152 around the island of Aruba. And starting out at about 3,000 feet here, I think. And today, what I'd like to do is talk about the KAP140, common autopilot in the GA aircraft that a lot of us fly, especially in this 152 and the 172. You can fly it with the G1000 on, or whatever. It's in quite a few of the aircraft that are in flight sim. So a lot of people use the autopilot and don't quite understand all of it. So I'm one of those. But I'm coming from the school of see one, do one, teach one. So hopefully what I'll be able to do today is impart onto you what I have learned about the autopilot. Let's see what I can do. I don't know everything about it, but I do know some things. So currently we are heading come on, plane. Currently we're heading just about south from Aruba at just above 3,000 feet, about 80 knots. So the important thing about the autopilot, which I'm going to show you in just a moment here, is kind of getting everything steady before you use it. So we've got a pretty good altitude here and a pretty good speed. Wings are pretty much level. So I'm going to go to the autopilot now. And here it is. So the autopilot, this is the KAP140. You can see it's flashing here. An important thing to do first is make sure that you have your barometer set up for your altitude. You can do that in flight sim by hitting the B key, and it will set it for you. And then when you go back to the autopilot, you can see that it has set it for what my current barometer setting is. But then you have to come over here and hit baro. That lets the autopilot know what the altitude is for you. Okay, it's currently set to go to 1,000 feet. We're not near that or going to do that yet. The on and off switch is here. These are the buttons we commonly use. The heading is something we'll use quite often. And the nav occasionally if we have a GPS or set up to do a VOR. The approach and reverse, sometimes you use in IFR flying, but not that often in VFR. And altitude. Altitude will switch between holding the altitude where we currently are and pressing it again will give you your vertical speed, which we'll set with the up and down buttons here. So on set altitude, we can take this outer knob. It doesn't matter whether you're on the ground, just starting out, or flying. You can set this to whatever you want. The outer button here sets the thousands of feet, and the inner button will set hundreds of feet. So let's go to 4,500 feet. First thing we're going to do is check to make sure that we are still flying along pretty steady. We're still heading south. We're doing a little bit over 80 knots, and we're just near 3,000 feet. The first thing I'm going to do is hold my altitude and level my wings out. So you do that by starting the autopilot. So you hear a little noise, maybe a beep. Roll means it's going to level your wings out from wherever you are. The autopilot is on and is currently set on vertical speed. So whatever I was doing for vertical speed, it's going to continue to hold that now. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set our altitude. Now at this moment we're not using this 4,500 feet, but if I click altitude, it goes to altitude and it will immediately grab the altitude we are at and hold it. So there we are. We're flying along, we're rolling. The other thing you want to make sure you do is set your heading mode. And I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to turn my heading to the direction I'm pointing at. You can go a little bit off, a little bit south. Let's go directly south, okay? So once I've got my heading beacon set. Then if I click heading, it changes to heading here, and the aircraft will roll until it's pointing to south, which our heading is set on. Then it will straighten itself out. Did not change the altitude. The altitude was still holding at just below 3,000 feet. If we want to change the altitude, we will then take the up and down buttons here by changing the bearings on it. So we are set at 4,500 feet, and if I change my altitude, I'll get into vertical speed mode, and then from that point I can arm it for 4,500. That's altitude arm and vertical speed, and I can go, if you press the up, you go up. Now I'm going to go up at 500 feet per minute, and I'll go up and check, maybe give myself a little bit more power, because when you're climbing a bit you might decrease your speed, and you don't want to do that and stall. So I'm going to increase the speed and watch my altitude go up. Vertical speed is here. Altitude is climbing. I'm actually going to change this to 4,000 feet. Let's just go to 30. Let's go to 3,300 just to make it easier. So we're coming up to 3,300 feet. You can see that our vertical speed is dropping towards 0. And we're straightening out, and our speed is picking up. So now I'm going to bring my throttle back to take off some of that extra speed that we gained on the so now we're at 3,300 feet. I'm going to check my barometer again. Looks okay. So we're right at 3,300 feet, and now we're holding that altitude and heading again. So because I'm in heading mode, you can see that if I change my heading bearing to east, I'm going to go 90 degrees to east, 090 degrees. You can see that my altitude is going to hold right where it is. Pretty handy for some of those nice turns you want to make. And then once our heading indicator comes up to 090 or near 090 degrees, we are on heading mode, and the autopilot will hold us right at this point. Okay, let's go back down to 3,000 feet. So I go back to the autopilot. I can change this right now. If I change this to 3,000 feet, it's not going to change my altitude at all. I'm going to arm it. Sorry, arm, altitude alert. Press this, and my vertical speed now. Sorry, and then go down at 300 feet per minute. And we will go down to 300 feet per minute until we hit 3,000 feet. Now you want to also bring back your throttle a bit, because now you're going to be going too fast going down. So you can see we're decreasing at about 300, 400 feet per minute. And we will continue. Oh, I'm not sure what will happen. So at 3,000 feet, we should level off again. Let me see what happens here, huh? And I believe we did. Just leveling off now as we hit 3,000 feet. I got to give some power back to the aircraft so I don't stall. And we've leveled off at 3,000 feet. Now just remember that your autopilot does not change your throttle. It does not change your speeds at all, whether you're going up or down. So that's up to you. So just to go over it real quick while we're flying here, without my wife interrupting. Autopilot is on and off here. So if you're about to come in for a landing and you want to come down and take control of the aircraft, do not fight the aircraft. This is what it wants to do right now. So remember that to take control of the aircraft back, you need to turn the autopilot off. Autopilot off. It rewarns you, gives you tone. In a moment, it's off. So now we're just flying along, no autopilot. If I turn the autopilot back on, it will hold us at vertical speed of 0, I think, because we were at 100. And I'm going to go to 0, it'll bring me down to 0. And then if I hit altitude, it will hold me at 3,000 feet, right near there. So now if you want to change altitudes, just remember, you use the small knob to change the hundreds, and the large knob to change the thousands. And while it's locked onto altitude, you don't have to worry about it, it's just going to hold. It's armed. Hit Alt for vertical speed, and I want to go up, and now we will climb until we reach 3,500 feet. Remember, you might need, because we're climbing, you might need a little bit more power to hold your airspeed proper. So there you have it, folks, the autopilot for the KAP140. Pretty useful instrument, kind of fun to play with. Heading again, and we should turn to get back to our heading we had it set on. Selected for 3,500 feet, and I believe hit 3,500 feet, this VS here should go back to ALT. We'll watch it for a moment, see what happens. You can also tell on this instrument that we're at 3,400 feet and climbing, pressure altitude. And just about got back to 3,500 feet and went from vertical speed back to Alt, and ALT will now hold us at this altitude for as long as we have it on. Here I am heading back over the beautiful ocean here. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it.